The Aldis podcast is brought to you by Aldis International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello everybody, it's Mark Kelly here, Chief Customer Officer and co-founder of Aldis. And part of our Aldis ServiceNow series, I'm very happy to welcome Holly Snyder to the podcast. Holly is Director of Consulting at theante.com. Holly, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Excited to be here with you.
So you've got a particularly exciting story. Well, my kids definitely thought so when we were talking about your background and where you worked on the previous call. Tell us a little bit how you got into the world of ServiceNow.
Yeah, sure. So prior to working at the Anti, I spent 18 years at the Walt Disney Company. I do live in Central Florida, and it's kind of like a rite of passage that you have to work for Disney at some point here. But my last 5 years there were in the HR department, and that's where I was introduced to this thing called ServiceNow. I was brought on to the project team as a business analyst, and quickly I fell in love with ServiceNow. I thought it was awesome, the things that you could do with it, the flexibility, and I knew it was what I wanted to get into. I wanted to do more with it. And so I went out and put my resume out to many partners, anything that seemed to have an interest in HR, because this was all before the HR application was an official thing. It was hard to find an HR dedicated partner, but timing was right, and I found the Anti. I was ant number 10. We call ourselves ants, and there's really been no looking back. I've done a lot of incredible things there. Over the last 5.5 years, worked with really awesome people and customers, and I can't imagine being anywhere else.
And tell us a little bit about your day-to-day role and what you're looking to try to do. And it's a particularly exciting time in the world of HR, because if it's not the fastest growing module, it must be one of the most popular modules now, probably only behind ITSM, maybe a few others that I can think of, because everybody wants that type of experience to be smooth from a HR perspective within that. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your role day to day, and also some of the services that you provide within HR.
Definitely. So as Director of Consulting, I do lead a group of 5 technical consultants. My role is leading them, growth and development, making sure that the work is getting done. But I also work in capacity as a technical consultant on projects as well. And that is so rewarding to get to work with different customers and really help to build out their HR application for them. And we do work in many different aspects with them. Currently, I'm working with 2 very different customers. One I have is doing what we call a phase 1 implementation, where we're standing up the HRSD application with them. And going in, we assumed we'd get the baseline requirements, configure some low complexity HR services, just kind of get them off the ground and running. Doing simple things like submit a question about my medical benefits, or ask a question about taking a leave, maybe needing to update an address or change your name if you get married. It didn't take long, though, that in our design sessions, we realized they were skipping the easy and jumping into the water head first. So instead, we're building out some pretty cool process workflows to help them streamline the priorities that they've identified. And then I also have another customer that came to us. They also already had been up and running for a year or so, and they realized that the way that their HRSD application had been built out, that they weren't easily able to add new services or even adopt the new release functionality, because there'd been quite a bit of customization that had been done during their initial implementation. So I've been working with them to identify areas of improvement, get them back in the box, as we call it, so that they can easily scale and take advantage of the new great stuff that ServiceNow offers in their releases.
So am I right in saying there's kind of 2 paths? One part is where you take them on the journey of introducing and implementing the module in the HR side. And then there's also the part of they already have the module, but they're not necessarily taking advantage of it, or want to actually, scale it a little bit more and kind of get going, and you can kind of help them really kind of actualization of that module.
Yes, definitely. I think a lot of times when we think about technology and implementing a system, customers think one and done, right? We're going to get it done, move on, and not have to touch it. But I always emphasize to my customers that ServiceNow is a living and breathing system. It is not something that you want to just, again, one and done. You want to work to grow it and build it in a way that it can be grown, because ServiceNow in and of itself, right? Just ServiceNow functionality is always being new releases and implementing new functionality that I as the customer can take on. But then as I get into it as the customer, I'm going to realize that maybe a way I had originally built out a workflow, there's ways to enhance it to make it more streamlined or process function that is going to help us build the efficiency that we need to for that employee experience.
Yeah, and I remember doing on previous podcasts where a gentleman from the SAP group, and what he was telling me was at the time, the challenges of having that inconsistent onboarding process. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, because we all remember our first day of work. Whatever experience we have in that company, we always remember that first day, kind of like the first day of school. So when we look at it, you really want to get that right, because that's kind of that the moments that matter.
Definitely.
And you can have one employee that's ready to go and start their journey, and they've got their laptop passwords, they're in the Teams call for 9 a.m. and they're there for the kickoff. Where you might have the same team, different employee who doesn't have that luxury. They're reading documentation, laptop comes maybe dirty, no passwords, and that process isn't very, very good. And it's particularly challenging for the whole corporation, because you've got this kind of inconsistent process. And we know now that the statistics show that if you have a poor onboarding experience, there's probably a higher likelihood that you will churn within as little as 6 months' time.
Yes, exactly. Onboarding is definitely a big point of concern or interest for HR organizations, because, right, bringing in that employee, if I'm not having that experience that feels good to me, right, probably not going to stick around for very long. So we do work with quite a few customers to look at their overall onboarding experience. Yes, it can vary by department, but overall you hit it right on the head, right? That there are certain things that as a new employee, I have to have. I have to have access to the appropriate systems. I have to be able to get my security badge. I have to be able to maybe get a parking spot or get my equipment, right? Whatever it is that is those general things that I have to start me off. And then, yes, access to the appropriate experience from there. What is the knowledge that is directed to me as a new employee? How do I connect with other employees? Because that's also important, especially in a very virtual world, right? So I think that's where ServiceNow community and forums really comes into play with that new employee experience, that we can build out that forum for a new employee coming in where I can ask questions and interact with other people that are on that path with me.
Tell us some more examples of some of the customer problems that you help them solve.
Oh goodness. So let's see. I think some of my favorite, again, it varies a lot of just standing the application up, but employee document management is another thing that I've done a couple of times, and I really enjoy watching a customer take the right. A lot of times we think of, for employee document management, personnel folder management, right? I thinking about Disney. Disney had rooms filled with filing cabinets where you had to go through if something happened or you needed to look up an employee. You had to actually go through and file through the file cabinet to find their personnel file. But employee document management really helps with that, to be able to put it in one electronic storage. We can give access to the employee, right? Rather than the employee having to always call up and say, hey, HR, I need this document. They can go and find certain documents for themselves through the employee center. Or I, as the manager, if I need to find a disciplinary action or some kind of performance review, I can easily pull that up and then have a conversation with my employee about it. So employee document management is one of those special things that I really find neat to get to work with customers.
Yeah, it's a great one because it's I even think back now from my work experience like years ago, all the documents that I'd be moving and the dust that'd be there. And when you think about all the challenges that companies now face by having these documents lying around in terms of every different protocol being breached and broken and your fire, theft, whatever it might be. And for a lot of people, it's still reality. And for a lot of times, these companies are getting fined because they haven't actually got the proper processes in place to do that. So for customers that aren't necessarily utilizing the module as much as they probably should be doing, that has a negative impact because obviously you're spending a lot of money on it. You're not getting the value from it. People internally, the more it goes on, the less likely they want to engage with it because it becomes that thing. So rolling out additional modules in the future is going to become more challenging because the reality is if you're not getting the value from this, where's the incentive to go and do something extra to do that? So what advice would you offer to companies that are kind of feeling that pain and feel like they want to go to the next stage, but don't quite know how to do it?
Well, I think really it does come down to make sure that you are working with a ServiceNow partner that does understand HR. I think that's where the anti really is a step above the rest, is that we do have a lot of people that come with an HR background. Again, I worked in Disney's HR for a couple of years before getting into the ServiceNow project. And so I really felt like that helped me to be able to, or helps me now, to be able to see what is going on and give my recommendations based on my experience. And now, again, what I've seen at other customers. But it's, it also is on the ServiceNow partner responsibility list as well, as you're going through. For me, when I'm going through a phase 1 implementation, I'm listening to what they're saying and I'm thinking about, okay, right now we're going to stand up just their basic HR services, but what's that next piece? Where can I now direct them to really look and think about, okay, you've got your services, now what? Now what can I recommend to you to really take you to that next level? Because it all comes down to that employee experience, right? We want to make sure our employees are feeling cared for and satisfied, right? Retention, we want to keep them around. And so we always want to be thinking about what is that next piece that I can recommend to you. Or again, from the HR side, just making sure that I'm reading up, right? ServiceNow has a lot of documentation about new functionality, making sure that I'm engaging with the right partner to do it.
Yeah, as you rightly said, there's the current state of flow where you need to answer the questions, roll out the modules, maximize that. But the cheese is always moving because ServiceNow are always introducing different releases, different features. So you don't want to miss out on them because they could really positively impact your business and your organization to an nth degree. So you do need that trusted partner to be able just to kind of walk you through it, because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
Where you kind of need that guidance to say, you're nearly there with that, but let me help you and show you what other organizations are maximizing this module for that you're probably not necessarily thinking about right now.
Right. Exactly. And again, that is part of my role on a project, is to I am constantly looking forward to the next release, right? When ServiceNow is starting to put out the documentation, I go and I start reading to see what is coming so that I can already start suggesting, hey, when you do upgrade to Utah, right, there's new functionality around employee relations that you might want to be able to take advantage of. So let's think about making sure that I'm directing you in the right way so that you can take advantage of it.
Holly Snyder, Director of Consulting at The Ante, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. Really glad to have been here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the All This Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.allthis.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.